My parents used my money to gift a $320,000 house to my sister without my consent, so I let the bank take it and their perfect family fall apart. I'm Evelyn, and I was born just 4 minutes before my younger sister. Just 4 minutes, but enough to shape a lifetime of unfairness. My sister Natalie and I are twins. We grew up in the same 2-story house in suburban Salem, Oregon, but if anyone had stepped inside, they'd never believe we were sisters, let alone twins. My mom used to joke with her friends that Natalie was her perfect little copy, gentle, feminine, stylish since birth. I, on the other hand, was too strong, too independent, too unladylike in her words. As a kid, I didn't understand why Natalie always got everything before me. Princess dresses, toy kitchen sets, even the things I wished for but never had the chance to ask. On our 7th birthday, Natalie got an outdoor party, a 3-tier cake, and an instant camera. I was assigned to clean up afterward. When I asked why, my mom gave a dismissive smile and said, "Because you're the older sister, you should learn to share. Don't be selfish." The favoritism didn't stop at gifts. At meals, Mom always gave Natalie the best portions. If Natalie spilled water or broke a bowl, I got blamed for not watching your sister. When I got an A, Mom nodded like it meant nothing. But if Natalie earned a B+, she bragged to the whole neighborhood. I used to think maybe I was clumsy or just not good enough, but the older I got, the more I realized it wasn't about me doing something wrong. It was that I had never been looked at with fairness. I was a plan B in the very house I was born into. My dad, a quiet man who avoided conflict, never once stood up for me. He openly doted on Natalie, calling her his little princess, driving her to ballet every Saturday while I rode my bike alone to art class. Once I asked him why he never came to watch me compete in art contests. He sighed and said, "You're already good. You don't need praise." It sounded encouraging, but all I felt was an emptiness that grew day by day. The only one who truly saw me, really saw me, was my grandmother. She was the first to teach me how to hold a paintbrush and always had butter cookies ready when I was down. She once said, "Evelyn, you're like me. People don't notice you right away, but once they do, they can't look away." I held on to that like a shield whenever I got hurt. I learned not to expect anything from my parents. I taught myself how to do homework alone, how to sew up my old clothes while Natalie went shopping with Mom. I learned to hold back tears when Mom said, "Why do you always look so grumpy? Be more like Natalie." I thought things would change when we got older, but they didn't. When we turned 18, our parents told me straight to my face that the college savings could only cover one of us. And of course, that one was Natalie. They didn't hide it. They weren't even sorry, they just said, "You'll figure it out, you're strong." That sentence repeated in my mind like a sentence being passed. I left home with exactly $217 in my account, a suitcase of old clothes, and a laptop my grandmother left me before she passed. Everything I had, none of it came from my parents. And from the moment I stepped out of that house, I swore I'd never let anyone devalue me again. I rented a tiny room near the local community college. The walls were painted a faded yellow. The hardwood floors creaked with every step, but at least it was the first place I could call home. No yelling, no judgment, no denial of who I was. By day, I studied graphic design full-time. By night, I worked as a cashier at a 24-hour convenience store. Sometimes, I was so tired I'd nod off while standing at the register. But I never complained. I didn't have the luxury of options. No parental safety net, no savings account in my name, no childhood friends to study with. I had only myself and a handful of dreams not yet realized. I always tried harder than others. Every assignment, I went beyond the requirements. Every personal project, I spent extra hours researching, tweaking, polishing. Partly out of passion, partly to prove I wasn't invisible. And slowly it paid off. In my second year, I won a full-ride scholarship through a partner program with a prestigious university in Seattle. It was the biggest turning point in my life at that point. I remember my hands shaking as I opened the email. I had to read it 3 times before I believed it. The scholarship didn't just cover tuition. It included a monthly living stipend. For the first time in years, I could quit my night job and actually sleep. I texted my mom to share the news. No response. 2 days later, she replied, "Good. Natalie just got into an advanced yoga course. She'll be teaching soon instead of just following videos. I'm so happy. I reread that message. No matter what I did, it could never compare to Natalie doing. I remember in 12th grade, I won first prize in a statewide art competition, and a famous judge said I had rare artistic instinct. I brought the painting home. Mom glanced at it and said, "So, you're going to be a starving artist? That's not a real career." A week later, Natalie posted a scribble online with the caption, "My first drawing gig." Mom printed it out, framed it, and hung it in the living room. I once told Dad I'd been selected as a teaching assistant for the illustration department, an honor only 2 students in the entire program received. He nodded and changed the subject to how Natalie was thinking about starting a minimalist lifestyle vlog. "She's a natural at sharing, she'll be famous." He laughed. "And you?" "Well, just keep up the good GPA." I learned to fake a smile instead of arguing. I knew they wouldn't change. To them, Natalie would always be the graceful pride, and I'd be the independent fighter, meaning they could conveniently leave me out because I was strong. But I started to understand. I wasn't striving to impress them. I was striving to free myself from their definitions. I didn't need their approval, but I did need to recognize my own worth. Professor Carson, my mentor, once said, "Evelyn, you have the eye of a visual storyteller, and that's not something you can teach." That sentence lit up my world in those darkest months. I started painting more, uploading my work to a design forum. To my surprise, a digital art magazine reached out and asked to interview me for their Rising Star section. When the article came out, I secretly sent the link to my mom. 3 weeks later, she replied, "Too long. I didn't read all of it, but Natalie just dyed her hair. It looks amazing." I wasn't angry. I just felt nothing. That's when I knew I had truly grown up. When their silence no longer suffocated me, I printed that interview and slipped it into a journal, where I kept everything that made me proud. I knew there were more obstacles ahead. I had moved to Seattle at 20 to start the transfer program at a top private university. And ironically, just a few months later, Natalie applied and got accepted to the same school. We weren't in the same major. I studied visual communications. She enrolled in marketing communications, but the campus was small enough that I'd catch glimpses of her around lecture halls, the cafeteria, or the library. She always wore an expensive hoodie, spotless sneakers, and a designer bag I knew Mom picked out. I remember the first day of the school year. Natalie arrived in a car Dad rented just for her. I took the bus almost an hour from my tiny rental on the edge of the city. I never said it aloud, but every time I stepped through that school gate, I felt like I was walking into a world I didn't belong to. Everything gleamed, everything was polished, and I was all patched up. Natalie lived in the nicest dorm on campus, a double room she paid to have all to herself. Our parents not only covered her full tuition, they sent her a monthly allowance so she could focus without worries. As for me, I worked 3 jobs, waiting tables at a pizza place in the evenings, cleaning the library lobby early mornings, and picking up small freelance design gigs online on weekends. Some nights I barely slept. I worked, I studied, I survived in a tiny room where I had to curl up just to fit on a worn-out sofa left behind by a previous tenant. But I never once complained, not because I wasn't tired, but because I was so used to having only myself to count on. One time, during a joint visual communication class, the professor assigned a group presentation. Natalie and I were placed in the same group. Coincidence or irony, I still don't know. During the discussion, I suggested a campaign using illustrated graphics with interactive video. Natalie scoffed. "That idea is creative, but kind of hard to understand. I think we should go with something simpler, more accessible. Let's do spring fashion, fun, bright, viral," and the rest of the group agreed with her. And I, not wanting to cause tension, nodded. I ended up doing all the graphic design, video editing, and effects while Natalie made the slideshow and gave the main presentation. After class, the professor sent me a private email. "I know you built the foundation of this entire project. You have leadership potential, but you need to learn to speak up and stand by your ideas." I read that email over and over all night. It was both praise and a sting because he was right. I was always the quiet shadow behind the scenes. Natalie was different. She stood out. She organized photo shoots, ran the fashion club, always knew just what to say to be called charming and confident. On social media, she had thousands of followers. My parents constantly bragged to relatives. Natalie fits in so quickly. She's a natural leader. She knows how to build a personal brand. And me? My mom once called just to ask, "Did you send groceries to Natalie yet?" She said she's been too busy to get to the store this week. I didn't respond. I stood in my cramped kitchen, staring at the discounted pack of ramen in my hand, speechless. I knew I wasn't invisible. I knew I was on the right path. But sometimes watching Natalie get honored at school events while I stood under the dim lights below, my heart still sank. I wasn't jealous of her. I just wished just once my parents could look at me, really look and say, "You did great, Evelyn." But maybe that would never happen. And in that exact moment, I realized I would stop waiting. Not everyone is born to be acknowledged by the people they most hope to impress, but that doesn't mean they don't deserve it. At the end of my third semester, while most students were planning spring break trips, I quietly applied for internships. No one told me to. No one encouraged me. I read the postings on the school bulletin board, sent out email after email, editing every line of my resume like my future depended on each period. Natalie was different. Over a rare lunch between classes, she said, "Mom told me to just focus on school, not worry about internships yet. Dad will help me get a spot through his connections later." I just smiled. I didn't have those kinds of connections. Eventually, after 7 emails and 3 interviews, I was accepted as a design intern at a creative agency focused on educational media. The pay was low, but the office was cozy, the environment professional, and most importantly, they let me do real work, not filing papers or making coffee. I received feedback, revised my drafts, and saw my designs actually get printed for the first time. At the same time, I enrolled in an evening advanced class on interactive interface simulation. It only met Friday nights and barely anyone was interested, but I knew it was a skill employers were looking for. I cut my pizza shop shifts and made up for it with extra freelance gigs on weekends. Life back then was all about sketches, deadlines, and instant noodles, but I felt like I was living, not just surviving. One evening after class, Professor Ann Whitmore called me aside. She taught visual communication and was the toughest professor in the department. I never thought she noticed me beyond grading my work. "Evelyn," she said in a calm, firm tone, "I've been following your progress since last semester. Have you ever heard of the Benjamin Ford Honor Scholarship?" I froze. Of course I had. It was the school's most prestigious award given to senior students with leadership potential in the creative field. It covered tuition, living expenses, and included a 3-month international internship. I swallowed. I read about it, but I didn't think I was qualified. She looked me straight in the eye. "You are, but you'll need a recommendation. I'm willing to write it if you're serious about applying." That night, I spent hours reviewing the application. When I saw the list of past recipients, top graduates, national award winners with standout personal projects, I started to doubt myself. But then I thought about those mornings mopping library floors, those late nights on the bus ride home just to finish one more draft. I had come too far to stop now out of fear. I began the application. Every personal statement section I wrote and rewrote at least 10 times. I didn't know how to tell my story, the girl without a privileged start who never gave up, in a way that would resonate. So, I wrote it exactly as I had lived it. No sugarcoating, no hiding. 2 weeks later, I was called for an interview. Natalie found out. She casually asked, "Wait, you applied for the Ford Scholarship?" I thought only standout students got nominated. I didn't reply. I knew that to her, stand out meant being seen by many, but I chose to stand out by letting my work speak. On results day, I was at my internship when the email came. I had been selected. Not only that, I was one of just 3 students nationwide accepted into the international internship program in the Netherlands, a chance I once thought only existed in dreams. I stood in the office, hands trembling, eyes welling up. I didn't call my mom. I didn't text my dad. I didn't post it online. I simply emailed Professor Whitmore, "Thank you, I won't let you down." And silently I told myself, "Evelyn, you don't need anyone's validation. You just proved you're capable, resilient, and more than worthy." I received the Benjamin Ford Fellowship on a crisp March morning in Seattle. the confirmation email popped up while I was making coffee for my CO workers. My heart raced as I read the bold words, "Congratulations, you have been awarded the Benjamin Ford National Fellowship." I had to read it 3 times to believe it. I'd earned one of the top 5 national fellowships, not by luck, but by every sleepless night, every painstaking revision, and every invisible effort no one had noticed. I did it, and I did it alone. All day, I felt like I was floating. Coworkers hugged me. Professor Whitmore sent a short, heartfelt email. "I'm so proud of you, Evelyn. I thought I no longer needed anyone's recognition." But that night, back in my tiny apartment, I opened my phone and messaged my mom. "I just got the Benjamin Ford Scholarship. Only 5 people nationwide were selected. I'm one of them." I stared at the screen, heart fluttering as if hoping for a miracle. Despite all the past letdowns, part of me still wished maybe this time would be different. The message was seen after 11 minutes. 30 minutes later, she replied, "Oh, really? I'm cooking right now. I'll tell Natalie to call you later. She just hit 20,000 views on her new makeup tutorial." I read the message without blinking. A long while later, I closed my phone, set it on the table, and laughed. Not the joyful kind, but the dry, hollow laugh that holds back tears. Natalie never called back. No one asked what the scholarship was, how much it was worth, or what it took to earn it. They didn't care, and if they did, it was only to compare it with a social media video. I should have been angry, but I wasn't. I just felt empty. Maybe because this time I no longer expected anything. I had learned the hardest truth. Some people, no matter how hard you try, will never see you. 3 days later, I received the official invitation from the scholarship board, along with an invite to the awards ceremony in New York the following month. Flights, hotel, everything was fully covered. I stood in my room holding the thick cardstock letter, feeling like I was finally holding what I'd always longed for: recognition, respect, and real worth. I didn't post anything online. No photos, no status updates. I just took a picture of the invitation and sent it to my grandma, the one person who had truly seen me. She was gone, but I still kept her number in my phone. Still wrote to her when I had something to share. This time I wrote, "Grandma, I did it. You once said the world would notice me one day. Today, I believe you were right." The night before I flew to New York, I got a call from my dad. A rare thing. He simply said, "Your mom mentioned you got some scholarship. That's good. Congratulations." Then silence. No follow-up questions. No more words. I almost replied, but didn't. Maybe silence was the only way to end a conversation that had never truly begun. I boarded the plane with a small suitcase, wearing the one formal dress I borrowed from a classmate, a navy blue, simple but elegant. During the award ceremony, when my name was called, the whole room stood and applauded. I walked onto the stage under bright lights, but my heart was completely clear. I didn't need family in the front row. I didn't need proud looks from my parents. I had made it here, and no one could take that from me. I realized sometimes you can't force others to see your worth, but you can create that worth and live a life that makes them regret ever doubting you. The award hall in New York glowed with camera flashes and lights. Around me sat top students, respected professors, and executives from major U.S. media companies. The atmosphere was formal but not stiff, and inside I felt oddly calm. When the host took the stage and began announcing the Inspirational Leader of the Year award, a special title given to just one Benjamin Ford Fellow, I expected nothing more than to applaud someone else's moment. But then he said my name. Evelyn Brooks, a communication design student from Seattle who overcame every barrier, financial and personal, to rise by her own merit and extraordinary will. I didn't catch the rest. The room stood, the lights turned toward me, and I walked onto the stage to long applause. I accepted the glass trophy, my hands trembling slightly, but my eyes unwavering. This moment was mine, and I knew I had earned it. After the ceremony, I was invited backstage to a private networking event for standout candidates. There, I met Jacqueline Myers, the creative director of a multinational media company and someone I had idolized since high school. "Evelyn, I've read your file," she said, shaking my hand. Her gaze was sharp but warm. "You don't just have talent, you have grit. We'd like to offer you a spot in our mentorship program for rising creatives. We'll cover all your living expenses through the end of the year so you can focus fully on growing your skills. I held my breath. This wasn't just an opportunity, it was a turning point. I left the event under the soft glowing lights of New York City. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from friends, professors, even people I didn't know who had seen the short video of my speech posted online. Within a few hours, it had been shared thousands of times. I opened a message from an unknown number. It was my mom. I just watched your speech. You spoke so confidently. Your father saw it too. He said maybe we never really understood you. A short message, no apology, no direct acknowledgement, but it was the first time they admitted that there might be something about me worth reconsidering. I didn't respond right away. I needed time, not to forgive, but to figure out whether I still needed their approval at all. The next day, Natalie called. I hesitated, but picked up. Hey! Her voice was softer than usual. I just watched your video. I didn't think you were that good. I said nothing. She continued slower this time. I'm sorry for always looking down on you. I thought you just doodled to pass the time, but I was wrong. I didn't feel happy or sad, just empty. Because apologies, especially late ones, can't undo the past. I had come too far to turn around in search of validation. I answered calmly. Thank you, Natalie. I hope you find something worth chasing, too. Not for Mom and Dad, but for yourself. The conversation ended in silence. But for the first time, there wasn't that invisible competition between us anymore. Maybe we'd go our separate ways, and that was enough. That night, I sat by the hotel window, watching the city lights reflect on the glass table. I opened my laptop, pulled up my inbox, and typed my first reply to Miss Myers. I'm ready. Thank you for believing in me. Under those lights, I knew I had stepped through a major door, not into someone else's world of success, but into a life I chose and owned. I was no longer Evelyn, the one overlooked behind Natalie, no longer the strong one who didn't need care. I was just me. And for the first time, that was enough. 2 weeks after I returned from the awards ceremony, my mom unexpectedly called and invited me home for dinner. Something warm and cozy, she said. Her voice over the phone sounded different, gentler, like she was testing the waters to see if I'd refuse. I paused for a few seconds, then said yes. I didn't know what waited for me in that house after all those years of emotional distance, but I knew it was time to face it, not to hold on, but to let go. That afternoon, the old house on Evergreen Street looked just as I remembered it. Cream curtains, plaid fabric sofa, the old tilted family photo on the wooden shelf. But something had changed. Maybe it was me, or the way they looked at me. Mom stepped out of the kitchen, towel in hand, her eyes cautious but hopeful. Dad sat in the living room wearing reading glasses I knew he wasn't using. Natalie was there too, perched on the staircase, silently watching. Dinner started with small talk. Mom mentioned the new neighbors. Dad asked about the weather in New York. Natalie threw in a comment about a new marketing class she'd enrolled in. I listened quietly, feeling like a guest in the house I once called home. After the dishes were cleared, Mom invited me into the living room. Dad had removed his glasses and was looking at me for once without hiding anything. We want to talk to you, Mom began, about everything and about what's happened. I sat up straight, hands resting on my knees. I'm listening. Mom glanced at Dad, then back at me. We know we weren't fair to you. I'm sorry, but back then things were hard. We just thought you were strong. You'd be fine. I took a deep breath. Yeah, I know, I heard that my whole life. That I'm strong, that I'd figure it out. That I didn't need anything. My voice wasn't raised, but every word sliced through the air like a thin blade. I looked straight into their eyes, unflinching for the first time. But did you ever think, I continued, voice trembling, that I wanted to be weak, too? That I wished just once you'd ask, are you tired? Are you okay? But you never did. And now, honestly, I don't need it anymore. My dad looked away, a flicker of shame in his eyes. Mom nodded, her eyes red but dry. You're still our daughter, she said softly. Can we start over? I smiled, bittersweet but calm. Start over? Maybe, but it won't be the same because now I have boundaries. I don't need approval anymore. I don't live for one-sided love. If you want to know who I am, I'll share. But if not, I won't wait. Natalie had stayed silent on the stairs through the whole conversation. As I stood to grab my bag, ready to leave, she called out. I turned. She walked over a little hesitant. Do you think you made things harder? I mean, now Mom and Dad compare everything to you. I feel like I'll never be enough. I looked at her. Really looked. Natalie, once wrapped in layers of favoritism, now stood lost and unsure. I never did anything to make you feel less, I said gently. I just lived the life I deserved, and you can too. But you'll have to stand up on your own. Stop waiting for Mom and Dad to pave the way. Natalie lowered her head, saying nothing more. I didn't blame her. I knew that, if I was once the shadow behind her spotlight, now the roles were slowly reversing, and that scared her. On the way home, I rolled down the car window, letting the wind carry away the weight of the evening. I didn't feel angry or hurt, just light. I moved to New York on a June morning, the sun soft, the breeze dancing through the city streets like the city itself was welcoming me. My suitcase clicked along the stone pavement, and in my chest was a mix of nerves and freedom, a new chapter opening, one I had chosen myself. The media company where I'd met Ms. Jacqueline Myers officially welcomed me to the creative team as an assistant project director. It was my first job after graduation and the first place where my skills were truly valued. The office sat on the 22nd floor of a glass building near Midtown Manhattan. Every morning I walked from my cozy Brooklyn apartment, coffee in hand, catching the scent of pastries from street vendors. Life in New York was fast and loud, but to me it was a symphony of freedom and ambition. I had never felt like I belonged anywhere the way I did here. The job was demanding, but I thrived in the chaos. Intense brainstorming meetings, late-night idea revisions, projects displayed on billboards in Times Square. It all made me feel alive. Occasionally I got messages from my mom, mostly holiday wishes, health updates, or distant family news I no longer cared about. I always replied, polite, respectful, not cold, but no longer close. There was now a soft distance between us, not painful, but wide enough that I no longer expected anything. Natalie messaged me sometimes too. A picture from her new yoga class, a fun video with her friends. Once, just a message, I suddenly remembered that pumpkin soup you used to make. I didn't know if it was a memory or an unspoken apology. I simply replied, yeah, I still remember how to make it. Even after letting go, sometimes in the quiet nights of the city that never sleeps, my heart still tightened when I thought about family. Not because I was angry, but because I had once loved them so much I forgot myself. I focused on building a new world, a life not based on others' expectations. I learned to cook better, decorated my small apartment with my own artwork, occasionally attended weekend exhibits. My friends in New York were all self-made people who had stumbled but stood back up. They didn't know my past, and I didn't need them to Ibrahim. One evening, over drinks with friends after work, someone asked me, Evelyn, you always seem so strong and composed. Have you ever needed someone to lean on? I smiled without bitterness. I have, but I learned to lean on myself, and honestly, it's not a bad feeling. This city has taught me many things, that I don't need anyone to define me, that distance doesn't always mean loss. Sometimes it's a space to reflect and realize what truly matters. I'm no longer the girl who waited for a father's glance, a mother's praise, or a genuine hug from her sister. I'm Evelyn, the version of myself that I had to fight to become. I still call home on major holidays. Mom talks more now, mostly about health, recipes, or what flowers the neighbor just planted. Dad usually just says hi, then goes quiet. Natalie sometimes jumps in with small talk. We all know the connection now is just a gentle obligation, not a tether of the heart. I left not to run, but to begin a new life, one where I didn't need anyone's permission to live honestly. And here in this city that never sleeps, I've finally awakened. I turned 26 on a clear fall morning in New York. No loud parties, no glowing candles on a cake, just a hot cup of coffee, a small pastry roll, and the soft sunlight spilling through the fifth-floor apartment window I now called home. I spent the morning reflecting on how far I'd come, from the child living in her sister's shadow, to the student juggling jobs at night, to the woman I am now with a job I love, kind friends, and a little space of my own where I could breathe without walking on eggshells. I realized I no longer thought of my family with sadness or longing for approval. The half-hearted birthday calls from my mother became something I no longer expected. I still replied politely, but my heart wasn't in it. It wasn't indifference, it was peace. I used to think family was unchanging, that I had to earn love from the people who raised me. But the truth is, some relationships exist only out of habit and duty, not understanding or presence. One evening after work, I stayed late at the office to finish the final draft of a new project plan. The soft light poured over the desk as I looked up at the bulletin board covered in notes, sketches, and reminders, and suddenly it hit me. This was all built by me. No one pushed me to succeed, no one held my hand, every achievement was mine alone. I never had a family who stood behind me, lifting me up. But I had something even more valuable, belief in myself. Even when the world didn't believe in me, I built a life not on a foundation laid out for me, but from broken pieces I wasn't sure could ever fit together. My friends, the ones I chose, often tell me I have a quiet kind of magnetism, not because I'm loud or flashy, but because I always show up with steadiness, and they don't know how long it took for me to become steady, how often I wanted to disappear just to feel less lost. I used to think that if my parents saw me succeed, they would change. But now I understand. Not everyone is ready to admit they were wrong, especially when that wrong has lasted for years, and I don't need that admission anymore. Love, it turns out, isn't something you chase endlessly in others. It begins the moment you stop chasing and start finding it within. I started journaling again, not to complain, but to record the small things I was grateful for. A traffic-free morning, a compliment from my boss, or the neighbor's cat tapping at my window for cookies. I realized happiness doesn't come from grand gestures. It lives in the ability to notice beauty in the simplest of things. One Sunday afternoon, I walked through Central Park. Golden leaves scattered the paths, and a violinist played a soft lullaby in the distance. I sat on a bench and opened my phone to a message from Natalie. I know I wasn't the sister you hoped for, but I'm trying. Thank you for not hating me, even when I was selfish. I smiled. I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel that it was too late. We might never be those picture-perfect sisters, but I no longer resented her. We'd grown up, and each of us was learning what it meant to be an adult in our own way. I closed my phone and took a deep breath. I'm still Evelyn, the girl who once dreamed of a warm family, who once broke down for being unseen, who once believed she wasn't enough. But now I know I don't have to be enough in anyone else's eyes. I only need to be honest with myself. One spring morning, I sat in my small Brooklyn apartment. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting soft shadows across my desk as I sketched the first concepts for a personal project. Not for a client, not for anyone waiting, just because I wanted to, because I loved it. And I realized I had never felt more real. I had grown, not because I had a stable job or because my CO workers respected me, but because I no longer felt the need to prove anything to anyone. I still called home now and then to check on Mom's health. The conversations were short and gentle, no longer laced with bitterness. Dad didn't say much, but once he told me, "Your mom talks about you a lot, about your work. She's proud. She just doesn't know how to say it." I didn't ask for more. I smiled at him and changed the subject, because I understood some things don't need to be spoken aloud to be real. Natalie lives in Portland now. She just started her first job after completing a mental health coaching course. She sent me a picture of the small class she leads along with a short note. "You once told me to find something for myself. I think I finally get it." I replied with a heart emoji and a quick congrats. No need for long explanations. Between us now, the connection wasn't about obligation. It came from a sincere effort to understand each other, late but honest. I no longer resent my family. I don't romanticize the past either. I see it as it was. A chapter that hurt me, but one that also taught me how to stand. And because of that, I now treasure kindness, even the smallest kind. In the present, I've reconnected with a few old friends from Seattle, people who supported me quietly, but whom I had drifted from while running away from my past. Here, in this bustling city, I've begun building a different kind of family. Not through blood, but through respect, care, and the understanding that we all have tender places that need healing. At a small gathering once, a close friend asked me, "Evelyn, if you could go back to when you were 17, would you change anything?" I sipped my tea and shook my head. No, because without those days, I wouldn't know how strong I really am, and maybe I wouldn't have learned how to love myself. I used to live to be seen, acknowledged, loved. Now I live because I deserve a full life unconditionally. Without needing anyone else's validation, I hung a simple frame on the blank wall in my living room. Not a certificate or diploma, but a handwritten quote I crafted on handmade paper: "You are enough. Always were, always will be." Every time I come home late, every time I feel overwhelmed, I look at that quote and remember what I've walked through. I wasn't born into a perfect home, but I've learned how to build one for myself with bricks made of effort, self-respect, and a heart that no longer longs for what's behind me. Evelyn's story is proof that being born into a lack of love doesn't mean you're doomed to suffer forever. Though she was never truly seen by her family, she walked through the darkness alone and built a strong, successful life. Evelyn didn't choose resentment. She chose growth. She learned that true family is built on respect and unconditional love, and in the end, it was her resilience and self-worth that brought her lasting happiness.